The alien armada moved silently through the endless stretches of deep space, their massive ships gliding with purpose. The fleet, made up of hundreds of powerful warships, was on a routine mission. The aliens were confident in their superiority. They had explored galaxies, defeated countless species, and ruled over vast regions of the universe. No one dared challenge them, and their strength was known across the stars. The Armada was led by Commander Zarek, a seasoned warrior who had fought in countless battles. His fleet was headed towards a remote star system, one that had been marked on their map for observation. There were no known threats in the area, and the mission was expected to be smooth. The ships followed each other in tight formation, their advanced sensors scanning the space ahead. But then, something strange appeared on their radar, a tiny blip. At first, it seemed like a glitch, just a tiny speck in the vastness of space. However, the Armada's advanced systems flagged it as something unusual. It was moving steadily through the system, heading straight towards them. "Is it a malfunction?" Zarek asked, his voice calm but his mind beginning to race. His officers quickly checked their sensors, but they found no explanation for the mysterious blip. The readings were clear. Something, or someone, was out there, and it was heading straight for the Armada. Commander Zarek narrowed his eyes. "Send a transmission. Let's see if we can make contact," he ordered. The fleet's communication officers sent out a standard greeting in the universal galactic language. They waited, expecting a response from whatever had dared approach their mighty fleet. However, the silence stretched on. No reply came. "This is strange," Zarek muttered. The aliens had never encountered a species that ignored them completely. Most creatures, even those who had nothing to offer, would respond out of fear or curiosity. But this was different. The Armada's massive ships continued on their course, the tiny blip on the radar steadily growing larger. Still, no response came from the unknown vessel. Zarek's curiosity began to mix with unease. Whatever this ship was, it was not acting like any of the ships they had encountered before. As the blip grew closer, the alien ships prepared for a possible confrontation. Could it be a new threat, a hidden enemy they hadn't encountered before? Or perhaps it was a scout ship from a distant world. Whatever the answer was, they were about to find out. For the first time in years, Zarek's confidence began to waver. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, it was about to meet the full might of the alien Armada. But something about the mysterious ship made him hesitate. The coming encounter would change everything. As the alien Armada continued to approach the unknown blip, something unexpected happened. The tiny dot that had been barely visible on their radar now grew larger, revealing itself to be a ship. An enormous ship. The sheer size and power of it sent a ripple of shock through the alien fleet. This was no small scout or insignificant vessel. This was something unlike anything they had ever encountered. The ship came into full view, cutting through the empty space with an eerie silence. It was sleek and strange, with sharp angles and smooth surfaces that seemed to shimmer in the distant starlight. Unlike the alien ships, which were designed for intimidation and firepower, this one seemed different. The human warship, named Ardent Defender, stood in stark contrast to the dark, aggressive ships of the alien fleet. Zarek, the commander of the alien Armada, stood in his command room, his eyes fixed on the massive ship. He had never seen anything like it. The ship's outer design seemed almost too simple, but the more he observed, the more he realized how deceptive its appearance was. It was an impressive structure, one built for battle. "What is this?" Zarek muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. His officers, too, were struggling to make sense of the situation. The ship didn't match any of the classifications they had in their systems. It was unlike any species they had ever cataloged. "We have no records of this ship," one of the officers reported, confusion evident in their voice. "It's not on any of our maps or databases." The human warship moved steadily toward them, its speed and trajectory suggesting a clear purpose. Zarek's fingers hovered over the controls as he ordered another communication attempt. This time, the transmission was direct. "This is Commander Zarek of the Intergalactic Armada. Identify yourself immediately and state your intentions. You are in a restricted zone. This is your final warning." But there was no response. The human warship remained silent, its dark hull gleaming as it continued its approach, showing no signs of retreat or hesitation. Zarek frowned. It was impossible to ignore the weight of the situation. In all his years of service, he had never encountered a ship that simply refused to communicate. His first instinct was to destroy the intruder, but something about this ship told him to wait. It was as if the human warship was waiting for something, or perhaps testing them. At this point, the rest of the fleet was on high alert. The alien ships began to take defensive positions, their weapons primed and ready. The officers murmured nervously among themselves, exchanging uncertain glances. Just then, the human warship did something unexpected. Without warning, it sent out a powerful electromagnetic pulse that temporarily jammed the alien fleet's sensors. For a moment, the entire Armada was blinded, their systems flickering in and out of control. Zarek clenched his fists. "We are dealing with something far beyond our expectations," he said, his voice sharp with both anger and fear. He had thought the Armada was the ultimate force in the galaxy, but now a single ship had proven that they were not as invincible as they had believed. As the pulse faded and the alien fleet regained control of their systems, the ardent defender was already within striking range. The stage was set for a confrontation, and neither side knew exactly what to expect from the other. Zarek's mind raced. This human warship and the crew inside were about to test the limits of everything the Armada had ever known. As the ardent defender continued its approach, the tension in the alien fleet was palpable. Commander Zarek stood at the front of the command center, his eyes glued to the view screen. The human warship was now so close that it seemed to dominate the entire field of view. Its sleek, dark surface glinted with strange energy, and its design seemed so advanced that even the alien warships seemed primitive in comparison. Zarek's officers worked quickly, trying to re-establish communications with the human vessel. They knew they couldn't proceed with the battle until they had some understanding of who or what they were dealing with. But every attempt at contact was met with nothing but silence. "Try again," Zarek ordered sharply. His voice was calm, but his mind was racing. He had been through countless battles, but this was unlike anything he had faced. A single unknown ship, one that refused to communicate or show any signs of fear, was standing before them, challenging the might of the entire Armada. The communication officers typed commands into their consoles, sending another transmission out to the ardent defender. "This is Commander Zarek of the Intergalactic Armada. We demand you identify yourselves and state your intentions immediately. You are in violation of galactic protocols." For a moment, it seemed like nothing had changed. The human warship stayed silent, its dark shape now moving closer and closer, unaffected by the warning. "Still nothing," one of the officers reported, their voice tinged with frustration. "No response at all." Zarek clenched his jaw, a feeling of unease growing inside him. In all his years of commanding the Armada, he had never encountered a species that refused to communicate. Most beings, even hostile ones, would at least respond to a warning, even if it was just to threaten in return. But these humans, they had no interest in talking. His hands gripped the edge of his console. "Prepare for battle," he said quietly, though the words felt strange on his tongue. He had hoped for some sign of diplomacy, some clue as to who these humans were. But it seemed that would not come. It was clear now that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. The ardent defender wasn't afraid of them. It was waiting for something. The alien fleet began to move into formation, weapons aimed at the approaching human warship. They still didn't know what kind of weaponry the humans had, but their ships were clearly built for combat. The ardent defender did not look like a ship built to talk. It looked like a ship built to fight. Zarek took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. His Armada was ready for whatever this human warship had in store. but the fear inside him was undeniable. The calm demeanor he showed to his officers masked the deep uncertainty he felt. The silence from the ardent defender was deafening, and as it drew closer, the realization set in. This was no ordinary ship. The humans inside it were not ordinary either. As the alien fleet braced for impact, Zarek couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had just shifted. The humans were not like any enemy they had ever encountered before, and whatever was about to happen, he knew one thing for sure: it would change everything. The silence was broken as the ardent defender suddenly shifted position, its massive hull gliding effortlessly through space. Commander Zarek watched, his eyes narrowing, as the human warship made its move. No warning, no hesitation. The ship was now within striking distance, and Zarek knew it was time to act. "Open fire," Zarek barked, his voice sharp and commanding. The alien fleet responded quickly, their weapons coming to life. Beams of energy and projectiles raced toward the human warship, each aimed to break through its shields and disable it. Zarek's Armada had the numbers, the firepower, and the advantage of size. It should have been an easy victory. But the ardent defender didn't flinch. The human ship's shields flared with bright energy as the first wave of fire hit them, but it didn't falter. Instead, the ship moved with surprising agility, dodging the oncoming blasts like a skilled dancer avoiding a storm. It wasn't just fast, it was precise, turning and weaving through the chaos with almost unnatural precision. Zarek's jaw tightened. This was no ordinary ship. The ardent defender was designed for something more than just survival. It was designed for victory. "Retarget the engines," Zarek ordered. His fleet's weapon systems adjusted, but before they could fire again, the human ship did something that stunned everyone. With a blinding flash of light, the ardent defender released a pulse of energy so powerful that it seemed to cut through the very fabric of space itself. The pulse surged across the battlefield, knocking out a dozen alien ships in a single sweep. Shields shattered, systems failed, and the ships went dead in space. The alien fleet had never seen anything like this before. The ardent defender wasn't just a ship, it was a weapon of unimaginable power. The pulse had come from a hidden cannon that had been concealed within the ship's structure. It was a weapon unlike any in the galaxy, a technological marvel that no one had even dreamed possible. Zarek watched in disbelief as his flagship, along with several other ships, were crippled by the energy blast. His fleet had always prided itself on being able to withstand anything, but this attack proved them wrong. He had underestimated the humans, and now he was paying the price. "We've lost several ships," an officer shouted, panic creeping into their voice. "Their weapons are too powerful. We can't keep up." Zarek clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. The human warship was not only surviving, they were dominating. The ardent defender had managed to take out the strongest ships in the fleet with a single blow. The tide of the battle had shifted, and the Armada was now on the defensive. The alien commanders scrambled to regroup, but the ardent defender was relentless. It moved in again, this time launching a barrage of missiles that streaked across the black void of space. One by one, alien warships exploded in fireballs as the missiles struck their targets with surgical precision. Zarek could hardly believe what he was seeing. His fleet, once so mighty and invincible, was being torn apart by a single human ship. The power of this weapon, combined with the skill of the human crew, had turned the battle in an instant. The aliens had never faced an opponent like this, one who fought not out of fear, but out of strength. The ardent defender was unstoppable. The battle raged on, but the alien fleet was now reeling. Zarek, once confident in his Armada's superiority, was left standing in disbelief as the ardent defender tore through the ranks of his ships. His fleet, the mightiest in the galaxy, had been caught off guard by the overwhelming power and precision of the human warship. Zarek stared at the view screen, his hands gripping the edge of his console. One of his most powerful ships, the Ravager, had been hit by a missile from the human vessel. The ship had been ripped apart in a spectacular explosion, debris floating in space. The sight made Zarek's stomach churn. Never in his career had he seen a force so devastating. "What kind of weapon is this?" one of the officers asked, her voice trembling. She was the communications officer, and even she could not hide her shock. Zarek didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing. He had always prided himself on knowing his enemies. He had studied countless species, prepared for every threat, and led his fleet through battle after battle. But the humans, this warship, was unlike anything he had ever faced. The ship moved with a grace and speed that defied logic. Its weapons were more powerful than anything the aliens had ever seen. There was no explaining it. The humans were not just another species. They were a force to be reckoned with. "We need to regroup," Zarek finally said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Pull back. We need to rethink our strategy." It was clear that the Armada could no longer fight as they had before. The human ship had shown them a power they could not match. The aliens had underestimated the humans, assuming that they were just another weak species in the galaxy. But this warship proved otherwise. The Ardent Defender was something entirely new, and it had shattered the alien fleet's confidence in an instant. The fleet began to break formation, pulling back in disarray. The human warship, however, showed no signs of stopping. It pressed forward, its weapons blazing with precision, cutting through alien ships like a knife through paper. Zarek's mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. How had the humans managed to build something like this? What kind of technology were they hiding? "We can't just retreat," one of the alien commanders protested. "We can't let them defeat us like this. We have to stop them." Zarek turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "You're right, but we need a plan. We can't afford to throw everything at them without understanding how they fight. This is not a simple attack. The Ardent Defender is testing us." The truth hit him hard. The human warship wasn't just attacking. It was studying them, learning their weaknesses with each move. Zarek realized that the humans had planned for this battle long before it started. They had expected the Armada's retaliation and had prepared their ship to counter everything the aliens threw at it. Zarek slammed his fist on the console, frustration building. His pride, his confidence had been shattered by a single human ship. The battle was far from over, but the aliens were losing their edge. The Ardent Defender was not just fighting, it was winning. And in that moment, Zarek knew that humanity was no longer a species to be dismissed. They had proven themselves to be far more than what the galaxy had expected. The alien fleet, shaken by the relentless power of the Ardent Defender, began to regroup. For the first time, they were on the back foot. Zarek stood at the command center, his eyes locked on the screen, watching as the human warship slowly circled the battlefield, almost like a predator savoring its prey. The Ardent Defender wasn't just fighting. It was picking its targets, taking down alien ships with chilling efficiency. Zarek clenched his fists. His Armada was far from defeated, but every alien commander knew the truth now. The human warship was unlike any other. And if they didn't act quickly, they would be destroyed. "We need to hit them hard and fast," Zarek said, his voice cold with determination. "Regroup the fleet. We can't afford to lose more ships." The alien fleet adjusted its formation, focusing their efforts on taking down the Ardent Defender. This time, the aliens weren't just aiming to fight back. They were going to crush the human warship before it could deal another devastating blow. Zarek's fleet fired their weapons, sending a barrage of energy beams and missiles towards the human ship. The alien ships, despite their initial shock, were formidable in their own right. They had advanced weapons and shields, and now they had their numbers back on their side. For a moment, it seemed like the tide of the battle might shift. The Ardent Defender began to weave and dodge, narrowly avoiding the first wave of fire. But there were too many attacks coming from all directions. The human warship's shields flared under the pressure, but it didn't back down. Zarek watched carefully, trying to read the human ship's movements. It was fast, yes, But it was also calculating, almost like it was anticipating every move. With each passing moment, Zarek's respect for the human warship grew. But it was clear that the humans were not invincible. Even the ardent defender had to deal with the sheer power and numbers of the Armada. As the alien ships tightened their formation, Zarek gave the order. Focus fire on their engines. If we disable them, we can end this. The fleet shifted, locking onto the human warship's weak points. The ardent defender tried to maneuver, but this time, the alien fleet was prepared. Energy blasts and missiles rained down, targeting the ship's engine systems. The human warship, despite its speed, was starting to slow. Zarek could see the damage piling up on the view screen. The ardent defender was losing its edge. "Keep pushing. We're close," Zarek shouted. The pressure was mounting. The ardent defender fought back, firing its weapons in a last-ditch effort to stop the alien counterattack. One by one, alien ships exploded in bright flashes of light as the human warship's cannons found their targets. But even with its incredible power, the human warship was still outnumbered. For every alien ship it took down, 2 more seemed to appear in its place. Zarek's face hardened. This battle wasn't over yet. The ardent defender was powerful, but it could be beaten. They had to push harder. The aliens had always relied on their overwhelming numbers, and that was something the humans couldn't ignore. But the longer the battle went on, the more Zarek began to wonder, was there a limit to humanity's power, or was this warship just the beginning? The battle had reached a boiling point. For hours, the ardent defender had been locked in fierce combat with the alien Armada. The alien ships, despite their technological advantage and overwhelming numbers, could not break the human warship's defenses. Yet, as time went on, the ardent defender was beginning to show signs of damage. Its engines sputtered, its shields flickered, and its weapons systems, though still powerful, were beginning to wear down. Zarek watched the human ship carefully, his hands gripping the console tightly. It was a strange sight. The ardent defender wasn't retreating. It was fighting with a tenacity that was unmatched. It was clear that the humans had no intention of backing down. They had brought everything they had, and they were willing to die for their cause. For a moment, Zarek felt a wave of respect for the human ship, but that respect quickly turned into determination. He couldn't afford to lose. His Armada had to win, and he would do whatever it took to destroy the ardent defender. Concentrate all fire on their engines. We need to cripple them before they can get away, Zarek ordered, his voice filled with urgency. He had seen the damage. The human ship was slowing down, and now was the time to strike the final blow. The alien fleet moved in, tightening its formation as their weapons fired with deadly precision. The human warship tried to dodge, but it was clear it was struggling. The missiles and energy beams struck its engines, causing massive explosions to ripple through its hull. The ardent defender shook violently, and for a moment, Zarek thought they might have won. But then, something unexpected happened. The ardent defender released a powerful pulse of energy that sent shockwaves throughout the battlefield. The pulse was unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. It surged across space, crashing into the alien ships and disabling several of them in an instant. The alien fleet was caught off guard. Their shields couldn't withstand the force of the pulse, and their ships began to go dark one by one. Zarek's eyes widened in disbelief. How could the humans still have this kind of power left? The ardent defender was barely holding itself together, and yet it had unleashed one final, devastating attack. Alien warships exploded in a series of brilliant flashes, and the Armada's formation broke apart as they struggled to regroup. The ardent defender wasn't done yet. Zarek realized that his fleet was no longer in control. The human ship was not only holding its own, it was fighting back with an intensity that no one had predicted. The sheer willpower of the humans was unlike anything the alien commanders had ever seen. They were not just defending themselves. They were attacking with everything they had, determined to protect their ship and their people. Zarek's heart sank. He knew the battle was slipping away from him. The ardent defender had turned the tide of the fight in an instant. There was no denying it now. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. As the alien fleet struggled to regroup, Zarek couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. The humans had shown that they were not like any other species. They were stronger, more resourceful, and more relentless than he had ever imagined. And now he understood the truth. This was only the beginning. The galaxy had just witnessed the power of the human warship, and Zarek had no idea how to stop it. In this part, the battle reaches a critical turning point. The ardent defender unleashes a final powerful attack that shifts the momentum in its favor. The alien fleet is left struggling to regroup, and Zarek begins to understand the true power of humanity. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. The ardent defender hovered in the center of the battlefield, its weapons still at the ready. But now, the fires of battle had begun to die down. The alien fleet was in disarray. Ships were drifting, heavily damaged or completely disabled. Some of the remaining warships were retreating, trying to regroup and escape. The human warship had proven itself to be more than a match for the Armada, and the cost of continuing the battle was becoming too high. Commander Zarek stood in his command center, his eyes locked on the view screen. His fleet had taken severe losses, and it was clear that the humans had the upper hand. His mind raced. The ardent defender had shown an unexpected strength, something far beyond what the Armada had anticipated. It wasn't just the ship, it was the humans themselves. Zarek had never faced an opponent so determined, so ready to sacrifice everything for victory. He had to act quickly. The battle was lost, and now he had to find a way to save what remained of his fleet. All units, cease fire, Zarek ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. Regroup and fall back. We are not going to win this battle by force alone. His officers looked at him, confusion spreading across their faces. Sir, we cannot retreat. We cannot allow them to continue this threat, one of them protested. Zarek turned toward the officer, his expression grim. We cannot afford to lose any more ships. We need to regroup and reconsider our position. The humans are not like any enemy we faced before. For a long moment, silence filled the command center. The alien fleet had always prided itself on its ability to crush any opposition. But now, facing humanity's overwhelming strength, it was clear that brute force alone wasn't enough. Zarek needed another strategy, one that involved negotiation, not battle. We must open a line of communication, Zarek said. Prepare to send a message of peace. We need to understand who we are dealing with and why they attacked us. We need to speak with them. The officer at the communication station quickly began to prepare a diplomatic message. Zarek's mind was clouded with a mixture of anger and uncertainty. He had never had to negotiate with an enemy before, especially not one that had proven itself to be so powerful. But there was no other choice now. The message was sent, and the alien fleet waited, nervously watching the human warship. The silence that followed felt heavy. The ardent defender seemed to be just as still as it had been during the battle, its weapons silent for now. Zarek knew the humans were not quick to trust. Their pride was evident, and they had proven they were willing to fight for it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the response came. The communication channels crackled to life, and a calm, confident voice spoke through the speakers. This is Captain Mallory of the Ardent Defender. We are listening. Zarek took a deep breath, relieved but wary. This was it, the moment of truth. He couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. This is Commander Zarek of the Intergalactic Armada. We have no desire to continue fighting, he said, his voice firm but respectful. We are willing to discuss terms of peace. We need to understand your intentions, human. The voice on the other end was silent for a moment before responding. Your Armada came into our territory uninvited, Captain Mallory replied. You attacked without warning, and you underestimated our power. Now you will respect our sovereignty, or you will leave. There will be no more fighting. Zarek's heart sank. The humans were not just looking for peace. They were asserting their power. This was a warning, not a negotiation. "You want us to leave?" Zarek asked, his voice low with shock. "We want you to understand this. Humanity does not negotiate with threats. We dominate them. You are fortunate we are offering you peace now." The message was clear. The ardent defender had the upper hand, and the alien armada was at its mercy. Zarek could do nothing but accept the terms. He had no choice but to retreat. The armada began to pull back, leaving the human warship behind. Zarek's mind was still spinning with the realization of what had just happened. Humanity, in their arrogance, had turned the tide of the battle and forced the aliens to bow to their strength. As the alien fleet retreated into the depths of space, Zarek knew one thing for sure. This was not the last time they would encounter humans. And the next time, they would be prepared. The alien fleet slowly retreated into the vastness of space, their ships limping away, many heavily damaged, some barely holding together. Commander Zarek stood at the helm of his flagship, staring at the view screen, where the ardent defender still loomed in the distance. The human warship had not moved, its presence almost mocking in its stillness. It was as if the humans were waiting for the armada to leave, confident in their victory. Zarek felt a deep, gnawing unease in his chest. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated an armada that had once been feared across the galaxy. It wasn't just the power of their ship, it was the humans themselves. They were relentless, willing to sacrifice everything for their survival. And now, they had made it clear that they would not tolerate anyone who dared to threaten them. "Commander," one of the officers said quietly, breaking the silence. "What do we do now?" Zarek turned to face his crew. Their faces were filled with the same mixture of confusion and defeat that he felt. They had come to this galaxy, sure of their superiority, only to be humbled by a single human warship. A species they had never even considered as a threat had now proven themselves to be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. "We regroup," Zarek said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of defeat. "We will return to our home system, report back to the Council, and reassess our strategy." The officers nodded, though their expressions remained uncertain. It was clear that Zarek's words did little to ease the tension in the room. The truth was, no one knew what to expect from humanity now. They had shown a power that no one had anticipated, and Zarek wasn't sure how his fleet could ever hope to face them again. As the alien ships turned and made their way back to the edge of the star system, Zarek couldn't help but think about the future. What would the galaxy look like now? Would humans be the new dominant force? Would they continue to challenge other species, or would they choose to remain hidden in their corner of the universe, quietly building their strength until they were ready to strike again? Zarek had always been certain of one thing: his armada was invincible. But now, that certainty was gone. The human warship had shattered it completely, and in doing so, it had changed everything. Back on the ardent defender, Captain Mallory stood on the bridge, watching as the alien fleet disappeared into the distance. There was no celebration, no cheering from her crew. They had won, but the victory had come at a cost. The battle had been intense, and many lives had been lost on both sides. Still, the message had been made clear. Humanity would not be an easy target. They would fight back, and they would fight to win. Mallory looked out at the stars, the weight of the future heavy on her shoulders. The human fleet had proven their strength, but they had also made enemies. There would be more battles, more threats to face, and even though they had won this time, Mallory knew that the true test was yet to come. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had just begun to make its mark. As the ardent defender prepared to leave the battlefield, Mallory gave one last glance at the alien ships retreating into the distance. She knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. As the ardent defender glided through space, leaving behind the wreckage of the alien armada, a sense of quiet triumph settled over the crew. They had achieved the impossible, defeating a fleet that had once been the galaxy's undisputed force. But despite their victory, the atmosphere on board was not one of celebration. There was no room for arrogance. The mission had been a success, but the cost had been high, and the war was far from over. Captain Mallory stood at the front of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back as she gazed out at the vast expanse of space. She had led her crew through a battle that would be remembered for centuries, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. The alien fleet had been formidable, but the humans had proven that they were capable of much more than the galaxy had ever imagined. Yet she knew that the real challenge was still ahead. "Captain, the fleet has been secured," her first officer, Lieutenant Hayes, said as he entered the room. "We've lost some good people, but we held our ground." Mallory nodded. "I know, Hayes. I feel it too. But we've made a statement today. We've shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated." Her words were met with silence. The crew understood the weight of what had just happened. The Ardent Defender had not only defeated the alien Armada, it had sent a message. The humans were a force to be reckoned with, and they would not back down from anyone. As the ship moved deeper into space, the crew members began to reflect on the battle. The tactics they had used, the strategy that had worked against the aliens, were all fresh in their minds. But there was no time for rest. Mallory knew that they had made powerful enemies today, and there would be more battles. The human warship had proven that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the most advanced forces in the galaxy, but this was not a war that could be won with a single victory. Back on Earth, the news of the Ardent Defender's triumph spread quickly. People gathered in cities around the world, staring at screens as the broadcasts showed the alien fleet retreating into the unknown. It was a moment that would go down in history, a moment that would change the future of humanity forever. As Mallory sat in her private quarters later that evening, reflecting on everything that had happened, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This victory had proven humanity's place in the galaxy. No longer would they be ignored. No longer would they be seen as weak or insignificant. The Ardent Defender had changed everything. But Mallory also knew that there would be no easy peace. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had just made its mark. The other species would be watching, and some would see humanity as a threat, not a protector. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. As she looked out at the stars, Mallory realized one undeniable truth. The future of humanity had just begun, and this was only the first chapter.